You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning. The news behind the headlines.
Robert Mueller's report had been summarized by the Attorney General, and it had 2 points of interest in a 4-page summary. Number one, that Robert Mueller alleged to have found no collusion between Trump or any of Trump's associates and also the Trump campaign and Russia. And item number 2 was, while the matter of obstruction of justice was investigated, that Trump is not exonerated from that charge, but Robert Mueller has gone ahead, and while the decision about whether there was obstruction of justice in the Trump campaign over the last the presidency over the past couple of years, that Robert Mueller left that decision to be made by Congress, and Barr has already gone ahead and put his thumb on the scale and said there was no obstruction of justice, closing the matter, notwithstanding that Congress will and have voted for 420-0 to see the full report. But, I have a couple of questions, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure that perhaps a lot of you are not lawyers as well. But I have a problem with trying to come to terms with this. I'm used to white justice in America. I'm used to white justice. That's not a problem. I tell you, I was arrested in Florida, beaten half to death, thrown in jail for something I didn't do. But a couple of years ago, I was down at the cigar bar down on 63rd Street and in Madison Avenue. And I was down there. I'd gone in there for purposes of discovering cigars for a friend of mine who wanted me to purchase them. And the cigar bar is a place where you can smoke indoors. It's allowed, and they serve really some of the juiciest steaks, 2 inches thick or 3 inches thick, cooked by some of the best chefs in America, along with $100 cigars and cognac. And men of power and privilege gather at the cigar bar where they can smoke and eat and drink cognac at the same time. Well, I happened to be there one day, and Al Sharpton was there along with his bodyguard, who quickly avoided any contact with me. But the reason why the cigar bar is important today is because this is the report in the Mueller report that the Russian person that was advocating for collusion, Kalimnik, Konstantin Kalimnik to be full in his definition, a Russian tied closely to the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, met with Paul Manafort in this cigar bar. And in this cigar bar, Rick Gates was there, and Paul Manafort, Russian associate of Konstantin Kalimnik, and Paul Manafort handed over to Konstantin Kalimnik the polling data that the Trump organization, the inside polling data that the Trump organization had, giving detailed information, perchance, that could be used by Russian hackers to be able to discover the best way to get to people who are either leaning Trump or leaning against Trump, and how to manipulate them based on what the polling data indicated. And so it is clear this has been publicized, it's been reported and published in court proceedings and documented as an event that did take place, documented by the Mueller administration, that Paul Manafort did meet with Konstantin Kalimnik there at the cigar bar and hand over vital information to a foreign agency and a foreign nation, allowing them to interfere in the election of 2016. That's one thing. But my question is this, as I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to discover, well, how can you say that there was no collusion, and who was it that gave Paul Manafort the polling data, or told Manafort that he could release the polling data to a Russian cutout, or a Russian person who was purposed to aid in the hacking of the information about Americans to support Triple H. who was it that gave that indication? Not only that, I'm trying to find out why that does not rise to collusion or the conspiracy to commit collusion. Now, according to the reports that we've all witnessed over the last 2 years, and I was out in the mountains in Sierra Nevada mountains when we got the report about Manafort. But let me just read it. Mueller's most sweeping charges are unlikely to lead to any convictions. Why not? But in 2018, he charged the Internet Research Agency, a Russian troll farm, with meddling in the 2016 election. In an unusual, detailed 37-page indictment, he spelled out how the Russians allegedly tricked Americans into following fake social media. All right, that happened. And then the other thing here, the key players, is that Russian spies charged with stealing Democratic emails. Mueller's second big set of charges. Now, he said that there was no collusion, but what's these charges about? 12 Russian military intelligence officers. The similarity detailed 29-page indictment explaining how the hackers allegedly used phishing attacks to steal files from the Democratic National Committee. Look out, Watergate. And here's another one. Say there's no collusion. Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for financial crimes. Now, if I were Paul Manafort, I would be jumping up and down. Because had the collusion information not been open, then there'd been no reason for Paul Manafort to be arrested and discovered to be the lying, cheating scoundrel that he is. I think that Tribulation Trump should issue a pardon to Paul Manafort or reopen the investigation, because the premise for the 7.5 years that Paul Manafort is going to serve in prison is the collusion or the Russian investigation. And the fact that they wanted, as the Judge Ellis said out in Virginia, Judge Ellis said himself that Paul Manafort would not be before my court if he would simply cooperate with Mueller and tell Mueller about Trump's collusion and conspiracy. But because Paul Manafort refused to do that, they're hitting with other charges. A federal sitting judge named Ellis said that. Paul Manafort has the right to get out of jail now. I move that you let Paul Manafort out of jail. I move, if Robert Mueller is declaring that there was no collusion, I move that he rescind those charges against Paul Manafort and acquiesce to what Judge Ellis has said and give Paul Manafort back his freedom. Because a sitting federal judge, you've heard me say it the second time, said the only reason why Paul Manafort is being brought up on these bank charges is because he refuses to tell Mueller that Trump was knee-deep, not knee-deep, but up to the gills in colluding with Russia. And Paul Manafort knew it, but he wouldn't tell it. Left Robert Mueller nowhere to go. Konstantin Kilimnik has been charged with obstruction of justice. But to say Trump didn't. And Trump's confidant, Roger Stone, I can't figure out what's going on with Roger Stone, is charged with lying to Congress. Well, lying about what? Well, another possible point of contact between Russia and the Trump campaign is longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone. Mueller charged him with lying to the House Intelligence. What was he lying about? If there was no corruption, which he said there wasn't, then why is he being charged? This doesn't make any sense. This looked like voodoo justice. We call this Justice Department of this. This is a voodoo report. This 4-page report that Mueller, that Barr is, according to the 2 year, this is a voodoo report. You say there was no collusion, yet you charge Roger Stone with lying about collusion. This is a voodoo report. There's something you found over there in witch doctors, over there in Angola somewhere, and a third world somewhere. This is a voodoo report. This ain't no true justice report. And not just that. Got people cooperating like former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, pleads guilty to lying to investigate. Lying about what? Former Trump campaign aide Rick Gates, who's pled guilty to lying to investigate. He hasn't been sentenced yet. Former Trump personal lawyer Michael Cohen pled guilty to tax and bank charges, campaign finance violations, and lying to Congress. But lying about what? I mean, does not the report, I'm not a lawyer, right? But I want to ask you, and maybe you'll ask a lawyer near you, if Mueller has issued a report that Barr has alleged to state that there was no collusion nor conspiracy by anybody in the Trump campaign to commit collusion, if you can swallow that one, if you can swallow that one, you can eat an elephant with a knife and a fork and a little bit of hot sauce. Hot sauce on the elephant. If you can swallow that, I mean, if you can swallow the fact that there was no collusion by Trump or anybody in the Trump campaign, period, full stop. If you can swallow that, you can swallow an elephant. Anyway, but I'm saying that, hey, what ought to happen here, that the no collusion ought not to just exonerate Trump. What about Rick Gates? What about Paul Manafort? What about Roger Stone? What about Konstantin Kilimnik? I mean, what about all of them? What about George Papadopoulos? What about Mike Flynn? If there was no collusion, then I think Robert Mueller jumped the gun. And all these white boys ought to be brought back before the public television and given a complete exoneration, not a pardon, but a complete exoneration by a man who conducted a witch hunt, who was conflicted and unable to come to a just decision. No, this looked like black people justice, exonerate the white guy, let all the poor guys or small fish go to jail. Something ain't right about this report from Mueller. Something ain't right about this. Stinks to high heaven. It ain't right. And not that I'm trying to help you these guys out, mind you. They're not my friends. I'm not trying to help them out. I'm just saying, what's up? What's up? That you can exonerate Trump and say that Mueller says that nobody, including Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, that none of these people were involved in collusion. Now we know that's a lie. But come on, let's play around. Let's play along with the game here. That report, as best I can understand law, and I'll be corrected, but best I can understand, that report exonerates everybody, not just Trump. That report ought to exonerate everybody. Everybody ought to have a get out of jail free card right now, according to that report that was issued by Mueller on Friday to the Attorney General Barr. And Barr gave a summary on the 24th of March on and about 4:30 in the afternoon that there was no collusion by anybody in the Trump campaign. So let these brothers free. I don't know if I'll call these people my brother. I don't know if I'll call Konstantin Kilimnik. I don't call Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Roger Stone. I don't know if I'll call it. And what happened to Jerome Corsi? I don't know if I'm calling these people my brother, but let them free. Unless y'all gonna get into delivering black people's justice to white people now. That would be a switch. Because this is the way they treat black people, Even though the statutes say they're guilty, hell, send them to jail anyway. Throw away the key. I want to keep telling Michael Cohen, keep the faith, homeboy. Keep the faith. And let me say a word in defense of Michael Cohen. That line Darrell Scott said during the judiciary hearings when Michael Cohen was testifying, the Senate oversight hearing, that Michael Cohen begged Darrell Scott to tell Trump to let him go to Washington. You believe that, Sabbath? You believe that? Do you believe that Michael Cohen begged Darrell Scott, who can't find a necktie nowhere, that Michael Cohen, who was a 12-year compadre, has handled all of Trump's sexual crimes, would ask Darrell Scott to please plead with Trump to get him on board for Washington? You believe that? Darrell Scott lied, and he ought to be brought up before Elijah Cummings. Elijah Cummings, you ought to investigate Darrell Scott, because it was then reported by Mark Meadows in that hearing that day. Mark Meadows, who also brought that token black woman who stand there looking like she belonged to the damn Addams family, but she had a black daddy. That day, Mark Meadows also reported in that oversight hearing that Darrell Scott called in and said that Michael Cohen begged for a job and begged Darrell Scott to beg Tribulation Trump to give him a job in Washington. I think that Darrell Scott ought to be brought up on charges, and a full investigation ought to be had of Darrell Scott for lying to Congress. But let's just see how far that will go. I have a, you know, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. But I have a problem figuring out, why do you charge all these people if there was no collusion? Why did you charge all these? Why did you indict these 13 Russians? Why did Konstantin Kilimnik get charged? Why did Paul Manafort give over the data? Why? Why was the Trump Tower meeting? If there was nobody in Trump's campaign that did anything that looked like collusion, I swear. All I'm going back to not black people's justice. Well, we black folk, we understand. We understand. We know how to jiggy with this. We know how to roll with this justice system. We know how to roll with it. But this thing stinks to high heaven. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.